So, guys, Toad back again immediately with the NFL video for week 12, Thanksgiving week. Gonna have some real meaty plays here this week. There are a few that I like quite a bit. None of them today, though. The Thanksgiving slate. Um, Last week, 3-0, though, in the NFL, even though it was pretty close. I went over it on the Monday daily breakdown that I did. I don't know if I want to rehash any of that, but well, I should have talked about the college football. Well, I mentioned that I went 4-0 in college last week, which I mentioned in my college video. Didn't really rehash that. It was two blowout wins and then two like a little bit closer wins. What else can you say about that? That's the way it is. That's the way it went there. And then in the NFL, all three were pretty close and kind of could have gone either way, even though I think I was on the right side of all of them. The Arizona one depended on what number you got, which kind of sucks, but I had that extra half point there, so luckily I got the win there. Even if it was a push, it wouldn't have been that bad a day because I've been like running really hot. Minnesota Vikings did everything except win that game against Denver. Should have cashed on the money line. They did cover the 2.5 as an underdog, so and they did outplay Denver. You can watch my rant on that in whatever, my Monday daily breakdown or whatever. It just really angered me because Minnesota had the lead like all game. They absolutely should have won that game and just had one more turnover that was, I think Dobbs threw an interception. It was their third turnover of the game. The turnovers were just letting Denver hang around, and that last one handed Denver the ball like pretty much in scoring range already, and it's just bad stuff. And then just a really horrific final offensive possession for the Vikings there as well. And then, Green Bay, I was able to get there. That was, we'll talk about the Chargers in a bit, but I think the Chargers did not totally show up for that one, did not give it their all, but it was still a tight game. And even though Green Bay definitely should have won the game, which they did, but they almost did not do so. Like, there were a couple of points where they were letting it slip, and it looked sketchy. I'm like, oh, God, don't blow it for me, man. But they did not blow it. There was no Jordan Love blowing of the game, so at least there was that. But yes, it is Thanksgiving week. I am on a nice run. I've won 12 out of the last 15 days with last night's 2-1. I'm not gonna have a daily breakdown, so I didn't mention those games on the college football show, but there's no NHL today, no NBA today. There's that one college football game, which I discussed on the college football video. I mentioned a way to lean in that one at least. And there is college basketball, but I'm just not interested in the college basketball slate today. I'm sorry. There are some big games that are probably going to be pretty fun to watch, but I'm just not getting involved in it yet. And I'm not getting involved in any of the NFL Turkey Day games either. So I actually am having a day off. And last night it was a close call going 2-1. It was because Winnipeg won their game as a small hockey underdog there. They never trailed in the game. I don't believe they're up 1-0 and 2-1, but it went into overtime 2-2, and they wound up winning 3-2 in overtime. Luckily, they just were alternating between a 1-goal lead and a tied game, and that was a really close game statistically. It could have gone either way, so maybe a little luck involved there. When you have the underdog price and it's close, that kind of tells you that there is some value in that side that you took. So at least there is that. But luckily that one panned out. And then the NBA games, there was a possibility of both of them hitting. And Charlotte, they were dominating the whole game, man. There's no excuse for them losing that game. They were winning the game outright. I had them as a 4.5 point underdog, and they were just winning the whole game, and I stopped paying attention to it. They were winning by 13 going into the fourth quarter, and they almost didn't even cover. They lost the game. They lost by 3, so luckily they still covered. But they missed on the money line, which absolutely should have been a money line cash. So that pisses me off. Like, normally, like, I'd be pretty happy with the cover. I mean, I'm fine with a win, obviously, the cover. But, like, when it's almost definite that you have the money line cash the whole time, you're winning in, like, a blowout pretty much the whole time, and then you wind up blowing the game and that not happening, yeah, it sticks in your craw a little bit. Thanks a lot. Washington Wizards, not Charlotte Hornets. What am I saying? It was against Charlotte. But yeah, the Washington Wizards, they covered, but man, they were winning the whole game against the Charlotte Hornets, and it's like, come on, man. But still a cover, at least for the Wizards, and then the Bulls just looked awful. But the Bulls, they were still in it, man. Like I think they had a good third quarter or something. They had a nice run where they actually were within the spread in the fourth quarter. They were down 6, I think, at one point in the fourth quarter with not that much time left. And of course, they wound up still not covering and losing by 12 or whatever it was. But that was one where it was like they kind of had no business covering. They were just out of the game like early on and just looked awful for most of the game. But then they get back into it and they just tease you, and it's like, holy shit, they're actually gonna come. They're actually gonna come back and cover this, and then it's like, no, we're still just gonna fall apart at the end of the game. Oklahoma City Thunder is not. They have not been helpful to me. They have been just beating me, man, in games that I just should not even be losing, like that one against the Warriors. That one's gonna anger me for a while there. With not fouling intentionally, the Warriors up 3 with 3 seconds left. What are you doing, man? I don't know what's going on there. But let's get to the NFL slate here. So kind of wild in the NBA last night, but those 2 NBA plays wound up going 1-1, and then the hockey won. So I won last night with a 2-1 card. So in the NBA, it should have been a money line cash on Washington, and there was a possibility that Chicago was going to surprise me and actually give me a little bit of the luck and get within the number, but you can't get lucky on everything. So NFL, what do we got going on? It's Thanksgiving, man. Going to be eating. We're going to be getting in food coma here, and luckily we're going to be in a food coma because some of these games really are not interesting. The night game is a pretty good matchup, but and that's going to be when you're in the most strong of the comas, while you're passed out and you've unbuckled your pants and you're just falling asleep on the couch there. That's when the best game's going to be. Excuse me. While you're still prior to when you're actually totally comatose, you got these games that will make you comatose. You got Green Bay, Detroit in the 12:30 slate. Of course, Detroit and Dallas always historically host the Thanksgiving games here. Detroit has gone up from a 7.5 point favorite to an 8.5 point favorite. 87% of the cash on them, but 82% of the tickets. So they are the public home favorite, but it looks like there is money pushing them up as well. And I know there are some professionals that do like the Lions here. I see angles going in both directions here, which is why I'm not playing this. There are conflicting situations here. So with the Lions, they're coming off a bad game. They played really poorly against the Bears. And as I mentioned, I think I mentioned it in one of my videos, the Bears outplayed the Lions, man. It was a game where the Lions are a big favorite, and they turned the ball over 4 times. I think they were -3 in turnovers. They were losing by 12 really late in the game, similar to what Washington was, except Washington was -6 in the turnover department instead of -3. So they had Sam Howell just go out there, and their offensive line doesn't even exist. Excuse me. And they had Washington throw another interception right at the end there. So almost a mirror image of the Lions game where both of those teams were down 12 as like 8-point favorites at home late in the games. Detroit was able to score a touchdown, get the ball back, and score another touchdown and win. Washington scored a touchdown, got the ball back, and then threw an interception, a pick 6 actually, and lost. So it made it look way worse than it actually was. Washington actually statistically outplayed the Giants by a bit, whereas the Lions did not. So the Lions probably should have lost. The Bears out-yarded them by like over 100 yards. The Bears got Justin Fields back in that game where you might say that the Bears maybe had an injured player theory, a reverse injured player theory type of situation going on with them. But it was such a bad spot for the Lions that I think trumped the other situations that were going on there. The Lions, I think, were definitely looking ahead to this game, and they were coming off of a really fast-paced, like barn burner of a game where they won against the Chargers in a very high-scoring game. So that Bears game was kind of a sandwich type of spot where they overlooked it. They had this game coming up in 4 days. Even though it's against the Packers, hosting a Thanksgiving game is a bigger game than playing the Bears, who are pretty much the worst team in your division. So I think the Lions overlooked them and almost got caught, but they still wound up winning and not covering. They almost kind of came close to covering, really. Well, not really, but they wound up getting a safety at the end to make it look to give them a 5-point win instead of a 3-point win, which is kind of ridiculous as well. But now the Lions, I think that bad performance is going to mean that they're going to show up focused here, because when you have a bad game like that and you're a good team, that kind of shocks you back into focus. So that's the positive for the Lions in this game. But for the Green Bay Packers, they have one angle that is a pretty strong historical angle in the NFL, and I believe this is the case. I can look real quick, but I believe this is the case for the Packers. Yeah, they lost at home to the Lions earlier this year, and they got blown out. And it was a Thursday night game, I'm pretty sure. They got absolutely wrecked at home and looked awful against the Lions at home. So that sets up one of these road reversal revenge angles here that Green Bay is in. So that's one thing I will say about the Green Bay game. So the road reversal revenge when you're an underdog tends to be a pretty strong angle in the NFL, and that is, I've explained it before on the show, when you're divisional opponents and the team that's at home, and especially when the team that's at home is favored, if that team won on the road, especially in a blowout in the first game at the other team's house, that other team tends to be extra motivated coming into their house, and they want to get that revenge on them. You beat us in our house, well, we're going to beat you in your house. So that's what would keep me off of the Lions here. I think the Packers have that in-season divisional road revenge reversal angle there. So that's one angle that is a good historical angle on the Packers there, even though the Packers are coming off a nice win as well over the Chargers, which thankfully I won on that one. But the Packers are not going to overlook the Lions in a Thanksgiving game. I think both teams are probably going to treat this like a pretty big game. So both teams have reason to show up focused here. So that's how I look at that one. The next game, Cowboys Commanders, Cowboys Redskins, Cowboys Washington, whatever the hell's the Washington whatevers are like they're like Aqua Teen Hunger Force now. They're just changing their name every single season. Basically now it's we're the Washington Unit Patrol Squad now. The Washington what was it? The Washington something whatever. Yeah, that's what I'll call them from now on. The Washington Football Team. So that's who they are. The Cowboys are up from a 9.5 point favorite to a 13.5 point favorite. I don't know when it was 9.5. I don't know if that was the week before. Look ahead, and if that might be the case, like the teams look so different from each other last week that it might have shifted the line 4 points. I don't really know. Cowboys are going to be the public team. They got 74% of the tickets and 74% of the cash. Now it looks like here, the number looks like it is going up on them. They're a huge favorite, though. There's no way that I would want to lay that amount of points with Dallas here. I'm not going to do it. No, thank you. I don't think I want to get involved on the Washington Commanders either. The Washington, I got to stop calling them the Commanders and giving into that awful team nickname. The Washington something whatevers. The teams couldn't have looked any different last week, so that's why I lean to Washington here a bit, getting a ton of points too. Cowboys were not even in that good of a spot, really. The Cowboys were coming off. What were they coming off? I don't even know what they were coming off of, but they were playing at Carolina, laying a bunch of points on the road, which is not a good spot when you get this game coming up in 4 days. Even though it is against Washington, it's still your annual Thanksgiving game that you host. So I think that was still kind of a look at, but the Cowboys just went in and just demolished the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers suck, but the Cowboys look unbeatable again right now. That was a huge win. I don't remember what the Cowboys were coming off of in that game, but Cowboys couldn't have looked any better, even though it was against a bad team. They just completely dominated them. And on the other hand, like I said, we saw Washington look awful and lose to the Giants. The Giants have 3 wins on the season, I think, and 2 of them are against Washington. Does not look good for Washington. Washington was in a bad spot as well because I think they were certainly looking ahead to this game. I think it was almost kind of a sandwich because I think they were coming off of a game where they played out in Seattle, I want to say, and they played that game pretty tight, pretty close. So they were, even though they had lost to the Giants already this year, I think that they got caught in a sandwich there, coming off almost beating Seattle and then having this big Thanksgiving game to turn around to in 4 days against Dallas. Washington, they didn't show up. They did not put in a good performance, even though they outplayed the Giants statistically. 6 turnovers, man, you're not going to win at all in the NFL. It's kind of a miracle that with 5 turnovers up until the very last turnover there, they still were in a position where they had possession, needing a touchdown to still win the game. They could have still won the game despite being -5 in turnovers. So that's how bad the Giants are, really. Washington did outplay them statistically, but of course, Washington's offensive line is so bad. They put Sam Howell in a position where he's under pressure. He's awful too. And I don't know why he didn't just throw it out of bounds at that point. He was out of the pocket. You just got to throw that out of bounds and live for another play. No, he just throws it right to the defense. Pick 6, game over. Great. What can you do? So Washington winds up losing by double digits at home to the Giants, whereas the Cowboys just smoked the Panthers. So nobody's going to want Washington here at all, but that makes me look to Washington just a little bit there because I think the only value to be had is on Washington. They're just based on alone how these teams looked last week. I think that skewed the line a bit more towards the Cowboys. You're not going to find value laying this many points with the Cowboys. Even though they're better than they have been in some of these recent years, they have not, like in recent history, they have not been that good as a big home favorite either. On these Thanksgiving games, they have not been good as a big home favorite either. I think Washington's going to show up. I don't know what the Cowboys have up next or whatever, but yeah, I lean to Washington slightly in this one. What does Dallas have up next? I don't even know. What did they have going into the Panthers game? They were coming off a game where they absolutely annihilated the Giants. Or I thought they were in a bad spot against the Giants because they were coming off that close game against the Eagles, and they were just kind of let down in the end there, man, by the Eagles. I don't know, but they still. I thought they were in a bad spot kind of in both of these games. They just showed up and just crushed these lesser opponents. But that's the thing; they're lesser opponents, and it's like, looking at the Cowboys, man, when they've stepped up against bigger opponents, even though this is not one of the bigger opponents, they haven't done that well. Like, what is their best win, actually? Their best team that they've beaten is maybe the Chargers or the Rams. I don't really know. Like, not really actually that good. They've lost to the 49ers and the Eagles in kind of their two, like, real step-up games. They've been beating up on the lower teams, and they look really good for it, and people think they're awesome for it. But Washington is kind of a lower team, so who knows? But, again, I think Dallas looks too good, and they do have Seahawks, Eagles, Bills all coming up next. So those are all kind of bigger games, bigger opponents at least, even though this is a Thanksgiving game. And maybe there's a reason to show up there, but for Dallas, that hasn't been the case in recent history. Like I said, they've been bad in these Thanksgiving games. So that's the way I look at that. The slight lean would be to Washington getting the points there, and I don't have much of a lean in the Packers-Lions game at all, really. I know there were some professionals on the Lions expecting the bounce back off of the bad performance against the Bears, but like I said, the Packers are in that road reversal revenge angle, which I think mitigates that. And then in the night game, the 49ers have gone up from a 4-point favorite, which I think might have been the look ahead again, up to a 7.5-point favorite. And is that just based off of last week's results again? I don't know. They have 80% of the tickets, but 85% of the cash. So it looks like the cash discrepancy is on them. I'm not sure I buy that. I think I certainly buy that the public is on the 49ers. But I think this is another situation, kind of like the Dallas Washington game, where this is kind of you're factoring in last week's results too much, I would say, or the last couple of weeks. The 49ers, since they came out of that bye, it's like people have completely forgotten about the 3 losses that they had. And yeah, they had some big offensive injuries that hurt them in those games. They were without Deebo Samuel, I think, for all of them, and without McCaffrey for at least one of them. That certainly affected the 49ers in those games. It affected their play. But, since they've come out of the bye, they used that bye to get healthy, to refocus. They came out of the bye and they crushed the Jacksonville Jaguars. And now it's like the 49ers look like who we thought they were again. And last week they won by double digits against Tampa, even though it didn't look that good. It should have actually even been closer, and I'm salty because Tampa was up to like a 13.5-point underdog by the time the game went off, but in my pick'em pools, they were 11.5. I didn't have a bet on them, but I had Tampa in my pick'em pools. They should have covered, man. Towards the end of that game, it was still a 13-point game, and they were covering the larger number, and I think Tampa returned a kickoff back like into the red zone, basically, and wound up not scoring at all. I think they probably turned it over on downs or something, and they should have gotten within all of the numbers that were out there, so that sucks. But it makes the 49ers continue to look good because they won again by double digits, and maybe people still think Tampa is kind of a decent team. I don't know. That win looks all right for them. But now they're laying a lot of points on the road and having to go up to Seattle in a primetime game, man. It's a primetime home dog, and Seattle did not look good last week against the Rams, I think. Was that what it was? Seattle against the Rams? Yeah, I think so. And I think the Seahawks had one eye looking forward to this game here. Seattle, I think they were in a bad spot. Yeah, they wound up losing to the Rams. I had the Rams in my pick'em pools last week. I think they overlooked them. They had this Thanksgiving game to look forward to, a big look ahead, 49ers and then Cowboys and then 49ers again and Eagles coming up. I think they overlooked the Rams. The Rams did get Matthew Stafford back, so you could say maybe they're in an injured, reverse injured player theory situation. But when it's the Seahawks, I think you're going to show up for that game, and that's what the Rams did. They wound up actually coming out of there with the win, which I think is all of that is just going to give us more value on the Seahawks here. So I think the 49ers, with the way they've won the last two games, they're going to be overvalued just because they look too good based off of those games. Seahawks, we're looking ahead to this game. I'm pretty sure they're going to want to bounce back. That's not a good looking loss. Pretty ugly loss to the Rams. I think they're going to bounce back. They got Pete Carroll as their coach there. He's pretty good as a home underdog there. Taking all those points, I think, would be the only way I would look in the night game there with the Seahawks. And for the first time ever, there's a Black Friday game. So instead of dealing with the horrific nature of all the crowds on Black Friday, if anybody still goes out and doesn't do their shopping online, well, you can deal with the horrific nature of a terrible mismatch of a football game as well. How about that? The first ever Black Friday afternoon game, which I think is going to be like the Thursday game or games where it's Amazon Prime only, Dolphins Jets. Oh my God. Dolphins are up from 6-10. I don't know when the line was 6, to be honest, but I don't know if this is all just like if the 6 was the look ahead and it's just moved that much just based off of how bad the Jets looked. Oh no, this is because of the Jets quarterback change. Part of that is factoring into the line too. Yeah. So we'll talk about that. Dolphins. And again, I don't have any actual plays on any of these games, but the Dolphins are up to 8. They're up to a 10-point favorite now on the road. They have 82% of the tickets, but only 79% of the cash. So they're a public road favorite, a big road favorite, and the public is on them. The public loves the Dolphins offense, hates the Jets offense because they don't factor defense into the equation. The Jets have looked horrifically ugly, but there's a little bit of a cash discrepancy there. On the Jets side there. It looks like maybe some of the bigger cash is on the side of the Jets, whereas the public tickets are certainly all on the Dolphins. I would also only lean to taking the points with the Jets in this one, although I'm not going to quite get there with it. I think there are a lot of reasons to take the Jets there. The one thing that maybe isn't a factor for the Jets there, or might be a factor for the Dolphins here, is that the Dolphins didn't look that good last week against the Raiders. As a double-digit favorite, they only won by like 7 or something like that. So they didn't look that good against the Raiders. So I don't know if that's going to cause the Dolphins to maybe try to refocus a little bit here. Other than that, I don't see much reason to want anything to do with the Dolphins here, really, from my perspective. The Jets are the huge home underdog here. They have the much better defense, and that's what you want when you're getting this many points, man. The Jets, yeah, they have a horrible offense, but their defense is a lot better than the Dolphins' defense. So when you're getting points and you have the better defense and you're at home, that's the way that you kind of want to look in the NFL. I believe it's too many points to be laying. I think even though the Dolphins' offense is really good, the Jets' defense is good enough to hang around, I think, in this game enough. Maybe it'll be better of a game than we think that it will be. And the Jets are coming off just an awful performance, a blowout loss to the Bills. It just looks awful, and the Jets are making a quarterback change. They're finally benching Cody Wilson, the guy who likes to bang people's moms or whatever, which is a reason to love the guy. But football-wise, he's been pretty terrible. And the Jets are finally making the change. They're going to Boyle. I don't even know who Boyle is. Who the hell is he? I don't know. Tim Boyle. Oh, God, he's got a man bun. That makes it even worse. I have no idea who Tim Boyle even is, to be honest. Is he a rookie? I don't even know. But I think this situation is going to set up well for the Jets, actually, because we know that the locker room, the defense especially, they don't like Cody Wilson. They've been blaming him for the offensive woes of the team and saying, we're a really good defense and you're not doing your part on offense. Fuck you, Cody Wilson. Basically, there's kind of been that turmoil in the Jets locker room. That's been the case. So I think the team might respond to the quarterback change in a positive way. I think the defense is going to the team's going to be excited. Yes, Cody Wilson's finally out of there. They don't really like the guy. Now they got Boyle, Tommy Boyle, Tim Boyle. I don't know. He sounds like an Irish lad from around here, from the Boston area. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I think that is just going to give you a little bit of extra motivation on the side of the Jets, and it has shifted the line a little bit, where I think the odds makers are downgrading the Jets for that move. I'm not even convinced that it's a downgrade at all. Who cares who the Jets have a quarterback, really? If it's Rodgers, of course, that's going to make them better significantly. But if it's between Wilson and Boyle, who cares? Like, I don't think it matters at all. So that's the way I look at that. That's going to be, yeah, I would lean to the Jets there. I think that's going to motivate them a little bit. Man, how am I doing for time? I haven't even gotten to my actual plays yet, and I got 3 of them. Fuck, this video is going to go long. And the Sunday night game is going to be one of my plays, so I'll talk about the Monday night game real quick just because I cover the primetime games here. This one is hard to read. Bears-Vikings. Vikings are down from 4 to 3 or 3.5 at home. Looks like they have 70% of the tickets, but 64% of the cash is on the Bears. So it looks like the money, the market indicators look like they're all on the Bears, like the cash discrepancy, the number moving down on the Vikings. But I'm not totally sold on the Bears in this spot here, even though it is a Monday night game. People seem like they like the Vikings. They like the Josh Dobbs show. I don't know if Justin Jefferson's going to come back in this one or not, which that will help the Vikings, but it might be that reverse injured player theory type of situation where I don't know how many points the line's going to move with Jefferson coming back. He is not a quarterback, of course, but he is a big part of their offense, so he might have some effect on the line if he comes back. But what do we got here? Well, the Vikings, they played on Monday night, so they're coming off a tough Monday night game, a tough way to lose at Denver. So they have a shortened week. So I think that's not great for the Vikings. But the Bears, I think, are also kind of in a negative where they had the Lions on the ropes. They could have pulled off that big upset, and they wound up letting it slip and losing the game. And after that, I don't know, man. It's possible the Bears run out of gas after that because that was a big game where they almost had the upset. You almost pulled off the team. The upset against the team. It's leading your division, so the Bears could be in a bit of a hangover spot, even though it is a division matchup against a team that's a bit better than you, and you might show up for it. It's Monday night. The market looks like it is on the Bears there, but I would definitely be hesitant to play the Bears there just because they're in that spot where they almost beat Detroit. But I think both teams are in negative spots. The Vikings, yeah, are on the shorter week there. And I don't know who the Vikings have up next, but that might factor into it as well. Because it's possible they have the Raiders, so they don't have any reason to overlook this team here really. But those are my thoughts on that. So not many thoughts on that really. Let's move into the actual plays finally. Let's go. Let's try to get this done, man. First play out of the 3 is going to be on the Cincinnati Bengals plus 2.5. Yeah. I like a lot of things that are going into this, man. So the Bengals, you look at what's going on here. The look ahead was Bengals 5.5 or 4.5 against the Steelers, and that was going to be what the line was going to be with Joe Burrow on the Bengals. Now it's the Steelers, a 1.5 or 2-point favorite. I got 2.5. The 2.5s, I think, are still out there. Now the Steelers have gone from a fairly substantial underdog to a road favorite just because of the Joe Burrow injury and maybe because of how the teams looked last week as well. That's crazy. I think it's an over-adjustment. I think there's got to be value on the Bengals getting points at home now. I think we've gone too far, and the Steelers, they've looked a lot better than they are this year, man. They've been thriving on opponents' mistakes. Like, there are games that they should have lost, but they won because of bad mistakes on the parts of the other teams. Like the game that they won against the Ravens, the game that they won against the Rams, the game that they won against Green Bay. Like, Pittsburgh's record is better than the team actually has been. Yeah, Mike Tomlin is a good coach, and he's been doing a lot with what he has there, but I don't know, man. There are a lot of factors here that put me on the Bengals, even though you got 69% of the cash on the Steelers, but 63% of the tickets on them. So it looks like there's some cash discrepancy on the Steelers, but you can't really weigh that heavily, especially when the line has been moving like a ton like this. This line has moved because of the Joe Burrow injury, and this is an injured player theory spot, which I talk about it a lot. The first game that the team has, so in this case the Bengals, where your star player goes down like this, the team tends to step it up, especially when it's a division game. I think they're going to want to beat the Steelers, and they're coming off a pretty bad performance, so I think they're going to step it up. I think the line is overreacting to that injury. You got a rookie quarterback coming in there, which is, I don't even remember his name. He's some rookie quarterback for the Bengals, but he's been on the Bengals, so he does know their system. So it's not like they're just throwing some guy who doesn't know the system in there just completely fresh. So the Bengals are going to want to rally around this guy. They're going to want to step it up. They're sitting at 5-5. They got a division foe coming in who's ahead of them in the standings slightly. They're going to be motivated here. I would have to imagine they're getting points now at home. The guy knows the system at least, and because he's a rookie, there's going to be like no NFL game film on him. So the Steelers, one of their advantages is on the strategic side of things, is they have a really good coach, but that might be mitigated a little bit because they don't know what the Bengals' offensive schemes are going to look like with their rookie quarterback in there. So all of that, if you take into account the fact that the Bengals are now getting points, I think it's gone too far. So all of that, I think, are reasons why the Bengals are going to have some advantages in this game a little bit there. And the Bengals are coming off, like I said, a bad loss. They're coming off a bad loss against the Ravens, which everybody saw, which was on Thursday night. So they have extra time off as well to bounce back, to make some changes, to adjust to 2 losses in a row. But that Texans game was a sandwich, man. The Bengals had that huge win over the Bills, and they had a big game coming up on Thursday, 4 days later, against the Ravens. So I was on the Texans in that one. That's why they let that game slip against the Texans. Then that Ravens game, they just looked awful. The Ravens blew them out. Everybody saw it on primetime. They're going to want to show up for this game, man. You got your, you're going to want to rally around your rookie quarterback who's in there now. I like it, and I think that's, on the other side of things, I think Pittsburgh might overlook them a little bit because of that. They know Joe Burrow is out now. They might take them a little bit lightly, and this is not a good spot for Pittsburgh, really. It's their second straight road game, and they just had a tough physical game against the Browns, man. And now they have another road divisional game up after this, even though they're not traveling much because it's all in the state of Ohio, pretty close to Pittsburgh. But that Browns game was tough, and Pittsburgh was in that game. And it looked like Pittsburgh was going to find a way to win yet another game there, but it was not to be. That was a tough loss. Tough way to lose against a very physical Cleveland Browns defense. Pittsburgh might come into this game a little bit beat up, and they might take Cincinnati a little bit lightly because of the Burrow injury. So I like it. I like Cincinnati plus 2.5. I think you're getting you're getting value there for all those reasons. A lot of the situational angles that I like to look at line up there for me on the Cincinnati Bengals. That's play 1. Play 2, so that's in the afternoon slate on Sunday. Play 2 is going to be in the late afternoon slate on Sunday. The Buffalo Bills. Oh my God, we're actually going to find value on the Buffalo Bills for once. The public actually doesn't like the Bills for once. Yeah, well, when they're playing the Philadelphia Eagles, that is the case. People don't want anything to do with the Bills now because people have seen them play. They've not been playing well. They've looked pretty poor on that Monday night game where they lost to the Denver Broncos and whatever. It doesn't look good for the Bills, man. But well, let's look at the market first. The line has gone down a little bit from the Eagles 4 down to a 3 with juice, or 3.5. I think the 3.5s are still out there. 3, I think, is also fine, taking the Bills at that price as the underdog there. 56% of the tickets on the Eagles, but 52% of the cash on the other side on the Bills. I think, like I said, I think the public is they're off of the Bills. They like the Eagles. I mean, there's nothing to not like about the Eagles. The Eagles keep winning, and they like what they see out of the Eagles' offense as well, with star power there, star wide receiver, star quarterback. They love everything about that. And Buffalo has just looked ugly, man. Like, they've looked really ugly. They lost those 2 games, 2 primetime games. Everybody saw that. I think people don't really care about the game against the Bengals there because that was with Joe Burrow. That was a big game. Could have gone either way. So people might give them a pass for that. But they've been ugly for a while now, man. Going back to that game in London, which that was a bad spot where they lost to Jacksonville. Jacksonville was playing their second game in a row in London, so they had the huge travel edge there. And Buffalo was coming off the big win to maintain their hold atop the division at that point against Miami. So that was bad spot for them. They lost to the Jaguars. And then coming out of that, they've just been not looking good. They played, and a lot of these games have been on primetime. They looked pretty bad against the Giants in primetime. They lost to the Patriots, all this looks really ugly. They barely beat the Buccaneers in primetime, even though that was actually a game that looks, the Bills were better than the final score indicates there. The Buccaneers had a garbage time touchdown there. Should have been an easier win for Buffalo there. Then they lost the Bengals game, which people might give them a pass for. A tough AFC matchup there. Then they lost to the Broncos, which that was kind of a bad spot for Buffalo too, coming off that tough loss against the Bengals. They slipped up and lost again, both of those games in primetime. Then what did they do? They fired their offensive coordinator, and it seems like it paid dividends because their offense had a really good game. And yeah, it's against the Jets, but I don't think that's anything to scoff at, man. Beating the Jets, who, even though the Jets are a struggling team. Their defense is really good, and Buffalo put up a really good performance against the Jets. So that might have been the spark that Buffalo needed, even though I was saying, why did they fire their OC, man? Their offense wasn't really the problem, but whatever, man. They turned it around, and they just blew out the Jets, and it was kind of revenge for the Jets beating them at home in that first game of the season. So that was big. So maybe that's going to be a motivation starter for the Bills there. You finally got that win. It wasn't a game where you had to expend a lot of energy, a lot of effort there. Now you get to take that win with you on the road, even though, yeah, you have the Chiefs up next, but you can't afford to lose, man, because you need to do something to try to get back above Miami here. Buffalo had actually fallen out of the playoffs. Like, they need to do something, man, to remain in contention here. This is going to be a big game for them, and I think they're going to want to step it up. And on the other side, I think it's a bad spot for the Eagles. So I think, the perception of these two teams isn't quite what the reality is. The perception is Philadelphia's got the way better record. They're the way better team. So how are they only laying basically just a field goal at home? I think Philadelphia is only slightly the better team. I think it's very close, actually. I think the Bills are very undervalued at this point because of the stretch that they haven't been playing well. Philly has been able to do no wrong, basically. What have they done that's been bad? They beat the Dolphins. They were somehow able to beat Washington in that bad sandwich spot, even though, it was a horrible spot. They still won the game, unfortunately for me, even though I think I wound up pushing the +7 on Washington there. Then they beat the Cowboys, huge game there, to basically take control of their division. And then everybody saw what they did on Monday night. They beat the Chiefs. Huge win there. And now what that sets up here is a horrible situation for Philadelphia, even though, you're playing one of the good teams from the AFC, but it's a team that, like I said, people are a little bit off of the Bills now because they've kind of fallen into the middle of the pack standing-wise in the AFC. And now you're Philadelphia. You have a short week. You're coming off a monster game against the Chiefs. Not only was that a Monday night game against one of the top teams in the AFC, but it was Super Bowl revenge. And Philadelphia, they probably had no business really winning that game either because the Chiefs outgained them by like 100 yards, outplayed them, and it came down to at least one crucial fumble on the side of the Chiefs and some crucial drop passes, and Philly was able to get out of there with a win. So now they're coming off that huge win, short turnaround time to have to play the Bills. You're in a letdown spot off of the Super Bowl revenge, really 2 huge games in a row. You might look past the Bills, man, because then who do you have next? You have the 49ers, and then you have Dallas again. So you have 2 teams that are basically like NFC playoff preview games. So you're facing one of the top teams in the NFC, 2 of the top teams in the NFC with you, and the 49ers and the Cowboys. Those are huge games. Philadelphia might look past the Bills here, and you're laying points to the Bills. This is an awful spot. This is one of the biggest sandwich spots that you could possibly find, I would say. This is a nice post-Thanksgiving leftover turkey gobbler sandwich here, man. And I'm gobbling it up on the Bills. I don't think there's much else to say there, but this is a horrible spot for the Eagles, and I think it's a decent spot for the Bills to be turning it around with their new OC, gaining some momentum with kind of an easy win last week. I like it a lot. I like the Bills. I'm playing the Bills. And then finally, well, you know what I'm on because I skipped it when I talked about the primetime games because I am on the Sunday night games. So my 3 plays here are all in different time slots. I'm playing the Los Angeles Chargers. And this is another one where I'm fading the public here, where the Ravens have gone down from 4 to 3.5 on the road. The 3.5s are pretty abundant out there. You can take the 3.5 with the Chargers. That's what I did, plus 3.5. Ravens have 69% of the tickets, but 55% of the cash. So they are the public road favorite, which public road favorites are always pretty dangerous, especially when it looks like the cash discrepancy and the market indicators are all on the Chargers side. It looks like some of the bigger bets are on the Chargers, moving the number down, and the reason for the cash discrepancy being on the Chargers side there. How am I doing for time here? We're doing all right. I'm almost done here. This is my final game that I'm going to talk about. I like this a lot. I think this is a bad spot for the Ravens. I think the Chargers are being undervalued at this point. The Ravens are being overvalued. And the Ravens do have extra time, so that's maybe one advantage for them, maybe. But it's also kind of a disadvantage because people saw them dominate the Bengals in prime time, back when the Bengals still had Joe Burrow and the team. The Ravens couldn't have possibly looked better, and people saw that game. It was an isolated primetime game, and it's possible that the extra time off might actually hurt them a little bit because you're sitting there like reading the press clippings a little bit, like basking in the glow of that win. Like you're getting a little bit like high and mighty there off of that win. So I think the extra time off might kind of exacerbate that factor of it. Now you have to go out to the West Coast, and I tend to say that the East Coast teams having to go west is actually worse than the West Coast teams having to come east, because especially when it's a night game, it's actually the worst possible situation because it fucks with your biological clock, because you're playing at 8 p.m. out on the Pacific Coast, where Eastern time, your time, that's a game that's starting at 11 p.m. your time, and it's going to go into the wee hours of the morning on your biological clock. We've seen it happen a lot of times. It's a bad spot for those East Coast teams to have to go out to the Pacific time zone and play a night game. That's just really bad. We've seen those teams drop those games, and it's a letdown spot for Baltimore because they're coming off that huge divisional win, slaughtering the Bengals. And what did that do? That put them atop the AFC North. But Baltimore's completely in control of the AFC North, because if you look at the situation, what competition do they have in the AFC North now? They have Cleveland behind them, but Cleveland now lost to Sean Watson, and Cincinnati just lost Joe Burrow. So the teams that were thought to be your biggest competition in the AFC both just lost their quarterbacks for the season. So if you're Baltimore, I think you're thinking, we have this division wrapped up now. We just beat Cincinnati. Cincinnati now has a rookie quarterback playing for them for the rest of the season. They're not going to be a threat anymore. In Cleveland, I don't even know what Cleveland is doing at quarterback. Cleveland, I think, might have signed Joe Flacco now. I don't know. One of these teams signed Joe Flacco. I don't know what is going on there. And if they're not doing that, then Cleveland, because I think PJ Walker, who played earlier in the season for Cleveland, I think he's hurt. So Cleveland might be going with Dorian Thompson-Robinson again, DTR, who's played a little bit this year as well. And he has not been good at all. So Baltimore's got to be. And Pittsburgh, they're just not that good, man. Like I said, their record is better than they actually are. And if they're the biggest threat left to you, maybe that you think in your division, maybe it's still Cleveland, because Cleveland's defense is really good. But I think Baltimore's thinking, we got this thing wrapped up now. And now you got to go to the Pacific time zone. And on the other side of things, you got the Chargers. Chargers are sitting at 4-6, man, and they're just underperforming. Like, they still have one of the best offenses in the NFL, even though their defense is no good. They're not a bad team, and now they're sitting at 4-6. Nobody's going to want them now because they look bad couple weeks in a row. This is when you get value on the Chargers. It's one of the spots where you can finally get value on a team that can score and has good offense. And they're in a good spot to kind of turn it around here, because they just went to the Packers and they just dropped that game. I was on the Packers. I thought it was a bad spot for the Chargers coming off that barn burner of a game where they almost were able to beat the Lions in a tough game at home. And then they had this game looming on the horizon, a pretty big game against one of the best AFC teams, the Ravens. So were they really going to be totally focused going out on the road to play a Green Bay team that had been struggling? No, and they were not. And they slipped up. But now you're going to get value on the Chargers. They got to turn it around, man. They got 2 losses in a row now. You get to come back home. You get to focus on the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are in a bad spot coming into your house, and you don't really have much to look forward to there on the horizon. It's a spot where I think you're going to be focused. You get to host the primetime game, and I like it. I like the Chargers, but it is reminiscent of a game that will never leave my mind, man. I'll just mention it. The worst beat of all time that I took. You guys might remember this game way back in the day in like the late 2000s. There was a spot on the board that was a rare spot that never happens, where it was the worst spot imaginable for the Baltimore Ravens back in the day. The Baltimore Ravens were coming off a game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which was that huge, massively physical defensive rivalry. These teams hated each other. They just played the Steelers. Then they had to go out to the West Coast to play. This was a 4 p.m. later afternoon slate game, so it wasn't as bad as having to play a night game out on the West Coast, but still it was one that like fucks with your clock and kind of turns it into a later game. They had to go out to play the Chargers, who were kind of like a mediocre team, if I recall, at that point. And they had up next, they had the Steelers again. So it was a Pittsburgh cheesesteaks Philly. What am I talking about? It was a Pittsburgh, what are they? The Primanti Brothers sandwich or whatever. One of those loaded sandwiches with fries all over them. was one of those big ass Pittsburgh loaded French fry sandwiches there that the Ravens were in, a huge Pittsburgh steel sandwich. And I was like, this is the worst spot imaginable. Automatic play on the Ravens. And the Ravens were a 1-point favorite, automatic play on the Chargers against the Ravens in that one. And the Chargers were a 1-point favorite. They were winning the whole game, but it was a close, low scoring game. Chargers were winning 13-3 in the fourth quarter, I think. And it was 13-10 late in the game. And everybody remembers this, man. It literally came down to the Ravens having to convert a 4th and 29 to extend the game. If they didn't convert the 4th and 29, it was going to be over. My bet wins. The Chargers win. It was like 99.99% that that game's over. You win on the Chargers. What happens? We remember it. Joe Flacco was under pressure. It looked like it was a busted play. All he could do was dump it off of the line of scrimmage to Ray Rice. Speaking of Joe Flacco, and Ray Rice had nobody in front of him because the stupid Chargers defense was in like a prevent mode, and they had all their guys way too far back, not even allowing, not even making sure to cover somebody who was like a little bit within the 4th and 29 yardage range there. Ray Rice was able to pick up the entire 29 yards, and I think he didn't even get it. I think he was short, and they gave him it was a bad spot, and they gave him a real benefit of the spot there, and they never overturned it or whatever. I don't remember if instant replay was in effect then. I think it might have been, but it was, I'm telling you, man, it was a bad call. He did not actually pick it up, but it was such an insane play, and it was so close. And I think the refs liked the Ravens at that point because they were one of the better teams in the AFC. They gave him the first down, and that was it. They got a field goal, sent it into overtime, and won on a field goal. And I was just, worst beat of all time. When it comes down to a 4th and 29 and the team against you actually converts it, I don't know what else to say. But hopefully it's not a repeat of that here. This is just reminding me of that. It's bringing back that post-trauma, man. It's bringing back that trauma for me, man. But we're doing it. We're on the Chargers. They're not laying points this time. They're getting points. Ray Rice isn't there anymore. Joe Flacco's not there anymore. Ray Rice is, I don't know, beating up women somewhere. And Joe Flacco is 80 years old, but he's on one of those AFC North teams now for whatever reason. So that's going to do it. Cincinnati Bengals plus 2.5. Buffalo Bills plus 3.5. LA Chargers plus 3.5. Those are the three plays. I like it. I like those three spots quite a bit, actually. I'm pretty strong on all of them. I like them all. And I don't even think there's that much else to talk about here. I talked about all the primetime games, the Thanksgiving games. There aren't really that many other angles that I see here that I like. I'll point out Browns Broncos just because I think this is a little bit interesting where this line has moved around a bit. So the Browns have gone, it looks like the Broncos have gone from a 3-point underdog to a 1-point favorite now at home. And the Browns have 79% of the cash on them, but 64% of the tickets. And there are some weird conflicting angles here where I think some of that might be like the look ahead situation. But I think, when did the Browns lose Deshaun Watson, though? Because he was out for last week's game, right? He got injured in the previous game, I think. So I think they were without Deshaun Watson last week. But, of course, the line is taking into account that the Browns don't have Deshaun Watson. But I think we might not even know who their quarterback is going to be. Like, I think it's going to be DTR again there. So this is all a really weird spot, I would say. But the Browns are coming off a big game, man. They just beat the Pittsburgh Steelers after beating the Ravens. So they're coming off. That was a barn burner. This is the game I think Deshaun Watson wound up getting hurt right near the end of it. A barn burner game where you overcame like a 2-score deficit, I think, to take out the Ravens and win outright against a huge win. And then you beat your other division rival there, the Steelers. Huge win there, too, in a tough physical game. Now with DTR as your quarterback, you're going out to Denver into elevation there. Tough place to play. It's not a good spot for the Browns, man. I will say that. You're in a letdown spot coming off big division wins like that, even though you do need to keep winning to try to compete with Baltimore there. It's not a good spot for them, I would say. It's not looking good. But the Broncos, they're in a spot where they've certainly been playing better, but they have a shortened week coming off that Monday game. So this is really an interesting game there, I'd say. So they came off a big wins, over the Chiefs, but then they went to the bye. So, and then out of the bye, they did not have any sort of letdown, really, and they because they were facing the Buffalo Bills. So I actually kind of leaned to Denver as a big underdog in that one, and they pulled off the outright upset there. So after 2 big wins in a row, They then had the Monday night game against the Vikings, which is where I thought they were in a bad spot there. And the Vikings did cover and should have won, outplayed Denver, but Denver somehow found a way to win that. So now they're on a short week and they're hosting the Browns. But I think it's a better spot for Denver here, I would have to say, because the Browns are in such a big time letdown mode there. It's kind of a weird situation. And then looking at the market there, it's flipped quite a bit, although I think the 3 was a look ahead. I think the 3 might have been back before the Browns quarterback situation came into effect there. But this is like, like I would probably only lean to the Broncos there. And the market, even though it looks like the cash discrepancy is on the Browns, I don't know if I quite buy that, because it might be because the line is kind of moved around a lot. And it's one of those weird situations where you don't know who the Browns quarterback is going to be and whatever. But I think I would probably only lean towards the Denver Broncos in that one a little bit. But that's a weird situation. I think both teams are kind of in negatives. That's going to do it for me, man. I'm Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. Once again, the play is Cincinnati plus 2.5, Buffalo plus 3.5, and Chargers plus 3.5. I'm Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. Follow me for political shit posting, offensive comedy, the Tower Gang podcast. We are the most offensive podcast on the planet. Had a great, hilarious show last night with Raven from Nephilim Death Squad. He's one of Top Lobs, so one of my co-hosts on his other show over there, their conspiracy-focused show. Our show is offensive comedy, towergangpod.com. You can find all the links. We're still on kind of all the major platforms there. You can subscribe to our locals at towergang.locals.com to give us some support. TowerGangPod.com for all the links, and shout out to the guys at flapper.net, FLAPPR.net. You can follow their blog, follow them on Twitter. They, like me, do political shit posting as well. They talk about sports and they talk about sexy women, and that's what we all do. We all like that. We're all broing out here. We're all broing around. It's going to do it, man. I got to get this video up with at least some time for people to watch it and see me break down the Thanksgiving games that I'm not betting on and don't even care about. I got to head out to my Thanksgiving festivities. I'm going to be enjoying it, man. I'm going to be enjoying the food, taking the day off betting-wise, and just enjoying these games. Hopefully you guys do too. Enjoy it. Enjoy your food comas. I'm from New England, man. We do it up. We love the Thanksgiving food. Anybody who shits on it is wrong. It is a once-a-year special situation. It's good, man. That turkey's got a lot of flavor, and I love it. I'm pro cranberry sauce. I'm pro stuffing, pro everything, man. Gravy, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, apple pie. Just give it all to me. Everything. Everything you'd expect a New Englander to like. That's what it is. I like it all. Just feed it to me. I'm going to gain 10 pounds over the next 3 days. Let's do it. Have a great day, man. Have a great Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks to all of you guys who watch my show, too, because I can't believe anybody watches my autism like this. And I've got you guys in the comments saying you like what I'm doing. Thank you, man. Thank you so much. Let's keep it going. Peace.